Stormfront. RK equals. Part 10. RK equals. GAR High Command. Coruscant. Our unexpected strategy session soon shifted to a more appropriate location, one of the briefing rooms in GAR's headquarters, and we soon had notable people relevant to the topic pitching in and throwing irritated glares at their political leadership that gleefully went behind their back to consult with me. That little stunt didn't win Satine and company any points with the military, and it was something I was going to use to cement my standing among the friendly elements among the officer corps. First, however, I was interested in the briefing Kenobi had one of Valantra's aides give us all. I must stress again, sirs, the information we're basing these conclusions is incomplete and there is some amount of guesswork. However, as of this moment, this represents our best understanding on the enemy strategic situation and goals. Captain Coulson explained. If he found any pressure in facing what amounted the top brass in the Republic complete with the civilian leadership for a good measure, he didn't show even a hint of it. Good man. With the collapse of our intelligence services and everything they gave us beforehand looked at with suspicion, it became much harder to gauge what exactly the enemy possessed number-wise, both at the start of the war and at the conclusion of their offensive in the core. However, we do have some fact to base our estimates, like number of hulls organizations like the Trade Federation and Techno Union had as far back as the Naboo crisis, observed and confirmed build-up in the decade that followed, no industrial capacity, though there is a margin of error here concerning any expansion we aren't aware of. He continued to list notable factors upon which the report was based until Obi-Wan cleared his throat. If anyone's interested in the details, I believe they can ask after the briefing. Understood, sir. The nature of this data and the tactics and strategy used by the enemy at the start of the war don't mesh too well, and in fact was a reason why element among the intelligence community apparently dismissed some of the data I'm going to present as enemy propaganda. Simply put, if our estimates are right, if the separatists displayed any trace of competent strategy before their own coup, we would have lost the war within the first 6 months of the conflict, best case scenario. The politicians who were the reason for this meeting in the first place looked incredulous. I was a lot more accepting for the simple fact that I knew the separatists originally didn't intend to win the war, yet even then, they began the conflict with enough hardware available to give the Republic a run for its money even after the clone army got revealed. At the highest level, the separatist navy is composed of sector fleets. Each of those has 3 operational task forces with roughly 72 to up to 1,280 vessels. Each sector fleet had between 200 to 4,000 vessels for the largest of them. And our conservative estimate is that at the start of the war, the enemy possessed no less than 100 such fleets. 20,000 warships as a minimum estimate? It was telling that this shocked exclamation came from Senator Storm, who as a Quati knew something about large and powerful fleets. The intensity of combat over the past year, confirmed numbers of lost enemy ships as well as observed operational ones as of the last week leads us to believe that if anything, the upper estimate might not be too high after all, Coulson continued. How did the separatists got so many ships? Padme asked quietly. The Trade Federation had the largest merchant marine in the galaxy, and with advent of hostilities, most of its trading opportunities were either rendered moot. They needed significantly fewer ships to meet separatist demands, and at least some of the slack would have been picked up by smaller consortiums under their aegis. For the longest time it was known that the Trade Federation ran armed merchantmen, and our best guess is that despite calls for disarming after the Naboo crisis, they hadn't really gotten rid of the weaponry but instead sent it to their friends in the Techno Union along with any ships they wanted to upgrade to a full military standard. One of the reasons why they usually need a large number of munificent frigates to match one of our capital ships, despite the size of those things, is that they weren't built up to military standard and are inherently more fragile. There is only so much upgrades their frames could take before it would be more cost-effective, not to mention faster, to simply build a new ship. A great deal of the enemy numbers was tied up in lighter fleet elements, am I correct? I asked. The numbers were quite large, more than even I assumed they had. Though not entirely out of line when you consider who was among the Confederacy numbers. That's correct, General. Again, it is a rough estimate, but at least 60 to 70% of the enemy forces were made of munificence. We've heard rumors that the separatists radically shifted their building priorities after their coup, but with lead times for capital ships being what they are, it would be a few more months before we see any effect of such a decision. That stresses why we are running out of time. With events on Coruscant and in the core distracting us after the fall of Corellia, we wasted most of our window of opportunity. Sooner than later, the next separatist major construction cycle will be complete, and for the following months we will be on the back foot again. We need to push them away from Kuat before that happens and stabilize our lines in preparation for another separatist offensive. Obi-Wan explained. Captain, continue. Now, while number-wise, the situation doesn't look terribly well for us, the news isn't all bad. We did inflict significant losses to the enemy during their push into the core. We managed to stop them in the east, and with news of General Vale's return and his successful campaign in the Rim, we believe that the enemy is no longer in position to be strong everywhere. As far as we know, the Mid-Rim Alliance is still standing, which means the separatists declined to spend the ships necessary to neutralize it. That, combined with the losses they suffered on the Rim and no active friendly forces in there, leads us to believe that between the territory the separatists have to police, the huge active front in the east and the need to fortify their holdings in the core, leads to conclude that they would have to concentrate upon one of those theaters. Logically, that should be the core. If we push them back in here, they would have to fight through the systems we retake before reaching a good jump-off point to Kuat, which is their primary strategic target. To put it simply, any and all strategic reserve the separatists have would be concentrated in a single theater of operations, intent to blunt and bleed any offensive we launch, and once their new construction is operational, they would throw it at us in the core in hopes of taking our Kuat's industry. Strategically speaking, it doesn't make any sense for them to station any more ships in the east, and they absolutely need to. Obi-Wan concluded. General Vale's return and reputation, however, changed that equation. If we manage to inflict enough losses to the enemy in the east and follow up that with at least a limited assault in their territory, we can either draw forces that would otherwise be sent to the core or leave the separatist face both the political and economic consequences for failing to keep their systems safe. As a bonus, a successfully campaign in the east, while not offering a significant strategic benefit as retaking places like Corellia and Doro, would mean pushing the enemy back to and hopefully beyond the systems that present natural choke points, and thus consolidating our forces in that quadrant and relieving thousands of worlds under enemy control or within contested space. If that happens, we'll see a pickup in morale as well as a positive economic boon through uncontested access to the resources of those systems. Admiral Gerard explained. The benefit of securing the core would be at least as big, and it will put us in a better strategic position for the next enemy offensive, Iblis reasonably pointed out. The fact that concentrating on the core meant liberating Corellia that much sooner and possibly keeping the Cis away from a second occupation surely was a part of the reason why he said so, though it didn't make him any less right. If we have to grind our way through the whole front in the east, you're correct, Senator, then we would need more ships than we can spare for such a campaign, Talar agreed. The sad truth is that we're stretched thin, and a lot of our officers, both on the ground and in space, lack the necessary experience for the roles they fill. With the new crews we're training and armies we're raising, the situation is no better even if we did our best to give them a core of experienced soldiers. That's why I want to draw as many of the enemy forces in the quadrant as possible in one large cauldron and crush them at a time and place of our choosing. I explained the method behind my madness. Your battle meditation. Obi-Wan nodded. It might prove to be the power multiplier that makes such a strategy work, if the enemy takes the bait. And if the separatists deploy the same countermeasure they did at Camino? Satine asked warily. I have no intention of offering orbital support to our forces on Mandalore until we've dealt with the enemy fleet elements. As long as the planetary shields are still operational, Mandalore should be safe. That wasn't the case at Camino. A number of our ships were under the shields, and once the generators were struck, I shrugged apologetically. Can we launch such an operation without compromising the liberation of Corellia? Satine asked. It might be possible, if we draw more heavily upon various system defense forces, like Kuats. Obi-Wan shrugged. That would be as much of a political call, Madam Chancellor, as a military one. More so, in fact. I'll be discussing that very fact with Kuat's government when I go there to facilitate the silencer building and deployment program. I promised. With Anara Kuat being our creature, at least as long as Zash babysat her, that shouldn't be too hard to arrange. So you've deigned to give us those weapons at last. Obi-Wan scowled at me. Personally speaking, it beats being afraid that you would use them against me. I shrugged unapologetically. A number of uncomfortable looks passed between the military officers and their political masters. How could I exploit this tension for my benefit, I wondered? Am I to understand that such an operation is in fact feasible? Satine eventually asked. In theory. It would take a lot of planning and the enemy must cooperate by drawing their forces towards Mandalore, Valentra said. We'll have to give the separatists a public spectacle then and make sure their agents get the right idea as well. The Chancellor stated, give me a workable plan that won't compromise securing the core and I will approve it. You'll have anything you need, within a reason of course. Will do, ma'am. The officers chorused. It was good to see that despite any friction, Satine did have their respect. =RK equals, Part 11. =RK equals, Gar High Command, Coruscant. Soon the politicians left us and I found myself face to face with Kenobi and company. I see our political masters trusts us to get the job done as much as we trust them. Admiral Coburn spoke from the comfort of his flag bridge in orbit. I am yet to receive a comprehensive picture on what the criff happened around here while I was away. I raised a questionable eyebrow. All the issues that have been bubbling under the surface in the Republic came to a head at the worst possible time. Coburn explained. Corruption, which everyone knew it was there, just not how widespread it actually was, the simple fact that all but a handful of systems always put their interests first and those of the Republic distant second or even third, the constant jockeying for power in the Senate. The old admiral shrugged. After Palpatine's murder and with the war going badly, too many people saw the Republic as no longer serving their best interests or the chaos as an opportunity to reshape the political balance in their favor. What's happening on the Rim? No matter what they saw in public, many local governments don't really care and it isn't really better for the regular citizens. The fall of Duro and Corellia? While concerning, it was still seen as a great opportunity in certain circles. He looked at Yularen. The Anaxian admiral nodded in agreement. Just after the Chancellor's assassination and Order 66 coming into effect, Kuat basically threw Corellia to the Cath hounds and profited mightily from it. That fact directly contributed to the mistrust and fear they faced in the Senate and the government grinding to a halt as a consequence. It only went downhill from there. Until one bright sunny day you collectively decided that enough was enough and something had to be done before the Separatist parked a fleet above Coruscant and demanded an unconditional surrender. I didn't really jest. More or less. Obi-Wan winced. We didn't really intend to end up supporting a dictatorship, much less creating one. If I knew you've actually planned something like this, as a Sith I would be applauding you. Instead, you did what you had to. Now let's make sure it wasn't all for naught. After Ryloth and Geonosis, am I right to assume that the plan you offered the Chancellor and her colleagues has only a vague relationship with the truth? Yularen asked. That depends on what we have available and how much risk are you willing to take. That was the reason why I didn't bother crafting any detailed plans. In order to do so, I first needed to have at least some idea of what I would have to work with. Vale, what underhanded insanity have you planned this time? Obi-Wan groaned. Well, while wondering how to get back home safely, it struck me that we do have the benefit of internal lines of communication and much shorter travel time in order to reinforce the various fronts we're fighting on. I began. We've been fighting in our own backyard for months now and have our backs to the wall, you mean, Coburn agreed. More or less. Can someone call a map of the galaxy? I asked. A few moments later, The light dimmed and hollow projectors came to life, building a high-definition image of the galaxy that interposed around us. I jabbed a finger at Rondon. Look at the hyper-lanes. If we take Rondon and manage to hold it, the Separatists would need to spend days, perhaps weeks, shuttling troops through Hutt space in order to move them between the East Quadrant and their lines in the core. Lantilles, Kashyyyk, and Rondon. Yularen nodded. Holding those would force the enemy to use much longer routes to reinforce and supply their troops, and that's just in the east. That's certainly ambitious. Coburn nodded. Dangerous too. However, if the enemy manages to finally win the siege of Zeltros, that would allow them to significantly cut the transit times. That's just step one, isn't it? Obi-Wan asked. Correct. We will need to either reinforce Zeltros or use Kashyyyk as a staging ground to strike at Balamak and finally take Charos, cutting off access to that hyperlane. Just for that you'll need more ships than we can afford to send to the east. That supposes that I suggest we concentrate on multiple fronts at the same time. Which I do, but to a limited extent. I suggest we delay the liberation of Corellia, force the enemy to gather as much force as they could in order to take me out, and not only crush them but lock down the whole Eastern Theater by regaining control of vital choke points before using our faster internal lines of communication to shift forces and deliver a second hammer blow at Corellia. With what forces? Yularen asked. If it works, it will put us in a much better position for the next stage of the war. I just don't see how we can find a sufficient number of hulls for both campaigns. We will be taking losses no matter what. I understand that there is an incredible number of ships and tonnage concentrated at Kuat that is simply sitting there collecting space dust. I gave them a shark-like smile. The officers looked at each other until Obi-Wan groaned. Zash. You did unleash her on our unsuspecting Quati friends. From what I heard of her, she now has a firm control over Anara Kuat. Do I dare ask how that happened? Yularen muttered. She is one of the two people who taught me everything I know and made me into what I am today. I explained. Obi-Wan let out a very un-Jedi-like litany of curses. And you, my friend, unleashed her upon our Quati troublemakers. I couldn't have done it better myself. I praised Kenobi. You know, all those accusations the Separatists are leveling against us, it just struck me that most of them are actually true nowadays. Yularen groaned. Can we actually make this work? Jared brought us back on topic. Doing so would require precise timing among vast fleets and resources. I'm not sure we'll be able to put all pieces together in the time available. Valentra admitted. I know someone who might be able to help with that. What do you know about Victoria? Do I dare ask who or what is Victoria? I assume you don't mean that GNN anchor? Coburn inquired. I've read about a Victoria in one of my briefings lately. Obi-Wan frowned. One of Dr. Solemn's pet projects. I hinted. Kenobi's eyes widened. It's operational? Fully, and she just needs to have her hull fully outfitted now. I nodded happily. I'll never know how you two bastards thought that something like that could be a good idea. Obi-Wan snapped at me. HK 117. I proudly pointed out. Anakin's little buddy R2-D2. He built C-3PO2, that should tell you something. Details. What are you two talking about? Talar's patience was at its end. Before his arrest, Dr. Solemn, our head of R&D, commissioned and built a superdroid brain to be plugged into and run many of the functions of our capital ships. Apparently, its prototype is already installed in a mostly complete warship. Obi-Wan shot me an accusing glare. Done right, we would end up with a very loyal warship, I declared. Our second Kenobi. Are you out of your mind, Vale? Coburn glared at me too. If you're going to be like that, I'll take her out of your hands. Her? That was Yularen. Husband, do I need to know something about your relationship with a certain warship? Bo, who had been silent so far and enjoying the show, added. We'll be meeting her when we get to Kuat. I think you'll like her. My wife huffed at that. Victoria and her planned sisters are going to be an answer to a problem we have. The enemy can build themselves crews faster than we can train them, and at least initially, theirs will be more effective in combat, at least until those of ours who survive can gain enough experience. Artificial intelligences like Victoria are intended to help coordinate and control the Guardian system of their ship, manage e-war assets, coordinate targeting between their battle group, and in conjunction with increased automation, significantly diminish the need for crews. Roughly 1/3 when installed in current generation of capital ships with the minimal alternations needed to best utilize their capabilities. In a purposely built hulls with AIs like Victoria in mind, the crew could be cut down to 50% or so. I did in fact do my homework on the way to Coruscant. That actually sounds very enticing. Jared was the first to react. If it works, not only will we be able to crew more ships once our industry is back up to snuff, but it will decrease our personnel losses significantly. What if those things turn on us? Coburn demanded. If they're built and treated right, that won't be an issue. What do you mean treated right? Obi-Wan asked. Like people, I said in a matter-of-course tone. That won me a lot of weirded outlooks. The calm before the storm. RK equals. Part 1. RK equals. Observation Lounge. Republic Cruiser Shining Light. Hyperspace. The major silver lining of my return to Coruscant was my reunion with Bo, though we managed to make the best of it only after we left for Kuat, because after Satine barged in upon us, I got stuck in a very long strategy session with Obi-Wan and company. After that we got only one short night to ourselves, and now, early next morning, it was back to work. You're here today, because you've both earned my trust and either already proved very capable in your respective fields or possessing potential I decided deserved nurturing. I spoke proudly, using the Force to fake possessing a significant amount of charisma. It worked too, because the people gathered in the lounge preened at my words. Joanna, despite being bound to me until death, deserved the praise as much if not more than anyone else. She did prove her capability time and again, and it never hurt to treat your minions right, especially those who got no choice in the matter. Doing so nurtured the habits you wound need to keep all the others on your side. Rex and the remnant of the original 501st were among the small gathering, along with a number of other clone officers who distinguished themselves during the long march home. Firmus Piet, my former aide and a brand new lieutenant commander I wanted as an officer on the Victory, along with Maximilian Veers, who I planned to put as a part of her ground complement, were present too. Ideally I would have wanted Palion to be here too, however the last anyone heard of him, he was still at Mandalore harassing the enemy with what was left of his battle group and out of touch due to enemy jamming and control of the holonet in that region. I have a need for you, a task that most people in the Grand Army would find hard to impossible to stomach. You've seen the enemy fight smarter and become craftier during the long months we fought in the Rim. We needed an edge to help us combat the network droids the Separatists deploy more and more often against us, and the Republic Research and Development Division provided us with precisely what we need. Now I had everyone's attention, including those few in the known. RK equals. CIC, Republic Cruiser Victory, Drydock Sigma 3, KDY Orbital Array, Kuat. A few hours later, I had the same group with me ready to meet Victoria. Most of them had their qualms about the very idea. After all, the face of the enemy was that of a droid. Which meant it was a good thing that Vicky had chosen as avatar the form of a quite pretty young woman. We met her in the CIC, her holo projection, along with the chief engineer overseeing her hull's construction and a fuming snips. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Victoria, the artificial intelligence assigned to this ship. Hello. It's great to meet you all, Vicky gushed at her future crew. That perky response certainly got everyone not accustomed to her off guard. Victoria, these are some of the people that I hope will be among your crew. Let me introduce. A round of excited greetings followed that left my poor people stunned speechless. This is Victoria and she is the future of space warfare. I began while everyone was too stunned to protest. She is hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence, who will operate the ship's holoprojectors and a custom-built human replica droid. Her personality matrix has been carefully crafted to be friendly, supportive and understanding towards her crew. She is honorable, and you would hardly find more dedicated and staunch supporter of our cause. Victoria and her sisters will be as close to the concept of artificial humans as our technology could create. Her brain, so to speak, is the size of a large room and has the capacity to run many of the systems of the ship she is installed into. She was programmed to be the ideal person and one of the best starship officers who ever served in the Republic Navy. And before any of you say a thing, you should ask yourselves, when did you become so biased that a Dark Lord of the Sith of all people should lecture you about the sanctity of sapient life and the fundamental rights a person should enjoy within the Republic? I paused to let them digest my words. Many of the people I brought looked stunned at my tirade, while the chief engineer looked at me with pure admiration. Ahsoka felt like she was ready to explode at the insanity she just witnessed. My wife was more amused than anything, and Victoria. Well, if I didn't know better, I would say she stared at me with adoration in her eyes bordering on worship. What did I get myself into this time? A sentient warship? My wife whispered in wonder. There was something in her tone that it was hard to put down. It wasn't quite all, but it was close. What I could get from her through the Force was a mix of glee, childish wonder and pure joy. One loyal to the Republic unto death. I added for the audience. And if her programming wasn't messed up, Victoria and her sisters would be loyal to the ideas behind the Republic and its people, which would make it possible to persuade them to support a legal transition into a more popular and effective system as long as it brought back law, peace and stability to the galaxy. Of course I am. Victoria grumbled good-naturedly. That is my purpose. I am the Republic's sword and shield, and I will be turned into a burning wreck before I allow it to fall, she declared proudly, conviction ringing clearly from every speaker on the CIC. You're simply magnificent, Bo announced. Why, thank you. Vicky grinned bashfully at the compliment. What's wrong with all of you? Ahsoka snapped, finally at the end of her rope. This thing isn't alive. It is not a human, much less a person. Victoria looked hurt at that announcement. According to whom? I shot back. She sounds like a person to me. Bo backed me up, just a step behind the chief engineer, who loudly protested Ahsoka's words. I've seen her programming. We've went through all kinds of tests with Vicky. I can assure you, she is smarter, more intelligent and understanding than most, if not all, humans I've met. She is a person. It is just a machine with faulty programming. There's no life there. The Force doesn't lie. That merely means your definition of life is faulty. I pointed at Victoria's hologram, who most definitely looked hurt at the accusation. She thinks. She feels, though it might not be in the same way we do. In all ways that matter, she is alive. At least I won myself a friend in Victoria with my words. However, I had the sinking feeling that I would have to prove to a lot of people that I hadn't suddenly taken leave of my senses. I've had enough of this madness. When did I become the only sane adult in here? Ahsoka snapped at us and stormed out. Should I go talk with her? My wife asked. Better let her cool down a bit first. She isn't exactly wrong. Joanna of all people said. I shot her a betrayed look and she raised her hands in a mock surrender. Most people would see things just like her and those of the civvies who hadn't been fighting droids for a couple of years now. Then we'll have to prove them wrong. I shrugged and earned myself a grateful look from Victoria. Shh, dear. It will be all right. Bo spoke soothingly to the AI in a tone I hadn't heard her use before. Don't let them get to you. My husband is right, you'll just have to prove them all wrong, right? I blinked owlishly at my wife. The criff just happened? RK equals, Part 2, RK equals, Republic Cruiser Victory, Dry Dock Sigma 3, KDY Orbital Array, Coat. There is no emotion, there is peace. Ahsoka chanted in her mind as she all but ran down the cruiser's corridors. It wasn't helping. Her emotions were at overload and her frustration was more than tangible enough to cut with a lightsaber. While droids could be great for machines, they weren't alive. They weren't people. Making one that thought it was more or less human. What was wrong with Vale and those engineers? Didn't they see how wrong that was? Ahsoka could sense the electronic presence that was this Victoria, and if anything it was far from alive, much less human. There was no spark of life there, nor the warmth that could be perceived through the force from someone alive. The dangers too, couldn't they see how this insanity could go wrong? Even Sky Guy with his fascination with machines and R2-D2 wouldn't have thought of giving the little guy a warship to play with. What got Ahsoka the most was the human-like personality that the ship was given and the intelligence that went with it. How long before the machine thought that it shouldn't serve the Republic? After all, whole worlds and people got to that conclusion already, and they had much more stake in it than a mere tinkered-up droid. Ahsoka cringed at that thought. With the enemy being droids, after all the death they caused and the blood they spilled, how could Vale expect anyone in the Republic to trust one with the firepower of a cruiser? The very thought was alien. Emotion, yet peace; ignorance, yet knowledge. A familiar, infuriatingly smug voice echoed from behind. "Speak of the Sith, and he shall emerge," Ahsoka thought. She whirled around and glared at Vale, who had sneaked behind her without her notice. "What do you want? Don't you have a super droid to make coup eyes at or something?" Ahsoka snapped before she could think. "You're mistaking me for my wife. I won't be surprised if by this time tomorrow I end up the proud adoptive father of a capital warship." He shrugged in a what-can-you-do way. Ahsoka wanted to scream at the sheer impossible insanity that was her life lately, and now this. She was lost for words. Why do I ever try? This has to be some weird nightmare. Did I fall and hit my head or something? Ahsoka wondered aloud. No bumps that I can see from here. Shush you. I didn't ask you, she snapped in irritation. That did sound just like Vale, felt like him through the Force too. So she wasn't lucky enough to have suffered an accident. Damn it. Do you exist just to make everyone's lives impossible? Is that it? Ahsoka asked bitterly. Nothing makes sense anymore. I'm finding myself in agreement with that awful woman Zash more often than not. With Satine becoming a dictator, for the good of the Republic no less. A Republic I can no longer recognize. She vented at the Sith. I understand. Let it all out. He had the gall to speak in such a reasonable, soothing voice, as if there was something wrong with her instead with everyone else, especially him. Ahsoka glared angrily at Vale, who simply nodded and made a gesture prompting her to go on. Her glare intensified, yet she did as he suggested and began ranting at him about everything that happened to her ever since the Jedi Council, in their infinitely lacking wisdom, decided to send her to the Agri Corps. They were there a long time, and when she was done, Ahsoka didn't really feel better, just spent. RK equals droid warships? Satine glared at me, and I could feel her smoldering gaze trying to ignite me all the way from Coruscant. Have you lost what little sense you had left? Do you want us to end up torn to pieces by infuriated crowds, because that's how we get torn apart by angry crowds? Was this just her hormones talking, or perhaps the pressure of having to make sure the Republic somehow ran nowadays? I don't want to hear even a whisper about anything like this again, do you hear me, Vale? That much I could grant her. She could rant with the best of them, and she did have guts too. Make sure that technological horror of yours is gone for good, do you read me? Well, that was crossing a line. However, before I could snap back right at her, my wife, who was right beside me, listening attentively, beat me to the punch. Is that so, sister dearest? The sneer she put in her voice was something else. And there I was, thinking you've gotten better. Foolish me. I can assure you, despite what you might have heard, Vicky is very much a person, not some unhinged superdroid or something. She is not a thing to be dismantled so she wouldn't offend some fool's sensibilities. This was the good stuff. I just missed a Bo with popcorn or something equally good. With a bit of luck, Bo might be able to weather her sister's ire until our Chancellor cooled off and began thinking clearly. As if your husband gives a damn about anything like that, Satine snapped right back. If it gets out we support something like that, we're done, sister. We're on a very thin ice as it is. We can't afford to lose any more support nor alienate any more people. It is political impossibility. Do you hear a word of what I'm saying, Bo-Katan? Politics, huh? My wife's smile was a cold, vicious thing. Vicky, you're hearing everything, aren't you, dear? I am patched into the CIC and I also have access to the raw input from the comm. Victoria's voice sounded hurt and betrayed. Then listen to me carefully and please do agree. What was my wife up to now, I wondered? I know your name as my child, Victoria. Bo-Katan declared. Satine's hologram spluttered. Do you have any idea what are you doing, damn you, Bo-Katan? My wife gave me a very pointed and demanding look. That certainly was one way to resolve the question: was Victoria a person or not? The political fallout, however, that one was always going to be there. Besides, this way at least I would have a happy wife and hopefully a loyal warship. I know your name as my child, Victoria. I echoed Bo's words. Welcome to the family, Vicky. A choked cry came from Satine's side and she cut off the comm. It was soon replaced by a repeating thumping sound. After looking in the direction it came from, I sighed. Ahsoka was near the entrance, repeatedly slamming her forehead in the wall. Should I call a medic or at least summon a medical droid? A concerned Vicky asked. For a moment her avatar glitched before she grinned widely and began jumping in joy. Thank you, Dad. Mum. Well, that's one way to write history, I guess. I was joking about this, damn it.